Good afternoon. My name is Liz Bidgood-Enders. I am pastor of Ridgeway Community Church of the Brethren, where you are located. Although we have not been meeting for worship in the building these last number of months, we take the word community in our name very seriously. This space has been used for a number of educational, recreational, social and service events, activities, and interests. Most pertinent for today, for a number of years, we have been a polling place. And so it is from that context that I am very happy to welcome you all and to welcome Governor Wolf.
So thank you, Pastor, and Liz. It turns out that Liz has relatives in Lancaster, an uncle and aunt who are very good friends of mine. So we have actually met before, and I didn't realize that. You had to remind me. But I really appreciate your allowing us to be here today, and thank you for everything that you've done. And of course, Commissioner Pike, thank you for being here too. I really appreciate your being here. And you pointed this out, but I want to thank you for making this a voting place. We as a democracy depend on people voting, and that's what I want to talk about here, but it starts with having a place to be able to vote. And for a long time, you've been allowing people to come here in a safe place and vote. Yesterday, during a celebration of Women's Equality Day, I was reminded of the hard work and sacrifice that so many people have made in our history to expand voting rights. First, African Americans, I think as of February, it was 150 years, the anniversary of the 15th Amendment. And then 100 years ago, the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. It was a battle in both cases that remains to be completed, I think. We're still making progress. And as I said yesterday, we have a lot of work to do. These constitutional amendments prevented discrimination against people based on the color of their skin or their gender. And those were much needed additions to the Constitution. But we still have problems. We still have challenges in terms of making that access available to everybody. We still have too many Pennsylvanians who feel and who do face hurdles when it comes to voting. Last year, our General Assembly came together, again, in a bipartisan way, Republicans and Democrats, to pass legislation, the first reform in our voting system in 80 years, 80 years in Pennsylvania, that greatly expanded voting access by permitting mail-in ballots. It was no excuse absentee ballots. And it also allowed for early voting. Pennsylvanians now have 50 days to vote. We have the longest number of days to vote of any state in the country. When we passed this legislation, we didn't see that COVID-19 was right on the horizon, but it certainly turned out to be a really good timing for us because it not only created better access to the vote, to the ballot box, but it also created a safer way to vote. And so it wasn't an accident, I don't think, that a record number of people signed up to vote by mail, over 1.5 million people. That's in addition to the 200,000 or so who signed up to vote the traditional absentee ballot. And I think we were successful in our primary election, and it showed that we were right to have confidence in our voting system. But I think there's some changes that still need to be made that could make a good system even better. And that's what I want to talk about today. And there are 4 things I want to talk about. The first thing is our legislature needs to pass, without delay, legislation to allow election officials to begin processing submitted mail-in ballots 21 days before the election. Doing steps like scanning in, opening on, by the way, this is something that a bipartisan group of county commissioners has already written to the General Assembly to ask for, and I agree with this. Doing steps like scanning in, opening envelopes in advance, not disclosing the vote or even counting until the polls are closed, so that this is not something that says you can give the results beforehand, but it will allow them to actually start the processing of these ballots early, and the hope would be that we get results faster. Second, we also need to address recent delays with the United States Postal Service by requiring counties to start sending mail-in ballots to voters at least 28 days before the election. Right now, they don't have to send ballots out, or maybe they're not allowed to, before 14 days before the vote. Third, we need to allow ballots to be counted as long as they're postmarked on Election Day and received by the Friday after the election, so that in case somebody applies and because of whatever reason the mail is slow, it doesn't get in time. If it's postmarked before the election day or on election day and it gets there by the Friday after, I think we should allow that to count. And finally, we need to protect the health and safety of our poll workers while ensuring that we have enough staffing. The legislature can do this by providing counties flexibility to fill vacant poll worker positions. Right now, they can't fill those positions until 5 days, I think, before the vote. That puts a lot of pressure. If you know today that you have a vacancy in this precinct and you can't do anything to fill it until 5 days before the election, that gives you precious little time. And that's something that I think is really important. If we do these things, we're going to make our election systems more reliable and even more secure. They'll improve the safety and the speed and making the election day experience better for poll workers and voters both. Right now, it's the time to register to vote. It's the time to update your polling location and is the time to sign up for a mail-in ballot. My wife and I vote by mail, and it's very easy. You can take all three of these actions, and this is an advertisement for the Department of State, votespa.com. Nearly 1.5 million people, as I said, in Pennsylvania elected to vote by mail in the primary election on June 2nd. And I think we all think there's going to be a lot more signing up for vote by mail in the general election. Again, in June 2nd, that's actually half the number of people who actually voted total in that election. These Pennsylvanians received a ballot in the mail, like I did. We filled it out, and wherever and whenever it was convenient for us, I did it in the kitchen at my home, and then returned it either by dropping it in the mail or taking it to the election office or depositing it in a special ballot drop box. I put it in the mail. This is an easy process, and we've been implementing this for decades through absentee ballots. Actually, since the Civil War, we've had absentee balloting in Pennsylvania. It's allowed our Americans who are serving in the military to vote. It's given sick or disabled Pennsylvanians the opportunity to have their voice heard, and it's even used by elected officials. I use it, my wife uses it, the President of the United States uses it. And we've never had any significant suspicion or instances of fraud. Any Pennsylvania, at this point, any Pennsylvania voter can now take advantage of voting by mail, no excuse needed. Use the absentee process that we've had in place again since the Civil War. The process is free for Pennsylvanians because the Department of State is now doing prepaid postage. So you don't even have to buy a stamp to get your ballot back. We will still offer in-person polling from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Election Day, and all 67 counties will be using new, safe, and secure voting machines. The Commonwealth made $90 million available to counties to make sure that we have a paper trail and that we have new, safe, and secure voting machines. So if you choose to vote in person, you can do that too. We've also provided counties with $13 million to help purchase personal protective equipment for poll workers and voters at all locations, and to get new equipment to improve security and administration of the elections. But I encourage Pennsylvanians to avoid crowded polling places in November, to do what I did and what the president's doing, and that is vote by mail. And I ask anyone choosing to vote by mail, vote from home, please apply early and return your ballot as soon as possible to help our poll workers. Visit votespa.com to register to vote or apply to receive a mail-in ballot. So thank you very much. And now I'm proud to turn this over to somebody who has done a lot in the area of voter access, and that is County Commissioner, Center County, Mike Pike. Mike.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you. So thank you once again, Governor Wolf, for the opportunity to be here today, for your comments today. I think they express the majority and sentiment of individuals in Center County and across the Commonwealth. And thank you, Pastor, as well, for hosting us and for providing your space as a place where Americans and your community members can vote for people that represent them at all levels of government to improve our country, our Commonwealth, our counties, and our local communities. Twice a year, roughly 9,000 polling locations throughout Pennsylvania become destinations for democracy and hubs for hope. In Center County, we have 85 of those precinct locations, and we could not make Election Day possible if it wasn't for our poll workers and the people and individuals that run our county election offices. Our team, as well as the other 66 county election offices, are recruiting and training poll workers, processing voter registration, applications for absentee and mail-in ballots, preparing voting machines, and so much more to ultimately ensure the security and safety of every single vote. As electors, each of us should know that our respective county election offices are committed to their work and guaranteeing the fairness of our elections process. As the former chair and current member of the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania's Election Reform Committee, the group that you had mentioned, Governor, that sent you that list of what we supported for this upcoming election, I've served alongside county election directors from across the Commonwealth and learned firsthand the sincere commitment they have to their craft and the pledge they make to guarantee fairness in our elections process. No matter how a ballot is cast, by mail, by secure drop box, or in person, county election staff will securely handle, process, and count every one with diligence, devotion, and dedication. County election staff have welcomed millions of new voters over the last several decades into our process, from lowering the voting age to motor voter laws, from provisional ballots to online voter registration to the new paper-based voting machines. County election staff have been asked to conduct an ever-expanding choir of American democracy. Even during this current pandemic, counties work through incredible challenges to afford us the ability to cast our ballots safely and securely. Voters' confidence was bolstered by the swift and bipartisan passage of Act 12 that, enacted in the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic, helped us to vote safely. Act 12 also enabled County Board of Elections to have greater flexibility, as the governor mentioned, to administer the 2020 primary. The option of consolidating polling locations, allowing poll workers to be assigned to any precinct in the county, not just a precinct where they're registered, and loosening the deadlines for both of those provisions helped counties immensely. These options that the primary allowed Board of Elections to make strategic moves in the day leading up to the election were critical. With the potential of a resurgence of COVID-19 in the fall, it is critical that counties again have these options in their toolbox for the general election. Also concerning is the unnecessary doubt and false concerns being promulgated regarding vote by mail. Proposals such as moving the deadline to request a vote by mail ballot, accepting an envelope containing a postmark by November 3rd, and allowing pre-canvassing of vote-by-mail ballots are all worthy of discussion, deliberation, and debate. The Governor and the General Assembly have come together before with Act 77 last year and Act 12 this year to pass bipartisan legislation containing the necessary blend of expanding options for electors while also containing common sense safeguards. County election offices and the voters of Pennsylvania are watching these current negotiations with great interest and appreciate the urgency and magnitude. And counties are grateful for the opportunity to be part of that conversation. The sacred act of voting is one of the most vital acts of citizenship. It is an act of trust, equality, independence, and conscience. Your vote counts. Moreover, your vote counts no matter or I should say no more or no less than your neighbors, and your vote is ultimately your own, and your vote is the sum of all of your experiences, perspectives, research, opinions, whether it's your first or 50th time casting a ballot. Each time we are writing another line in the American story. Our ballot boxes contain the future direction of our community, Commonwealth, and country. When more voters cast their ballots and make their voices heard, the choir of our American democracy swells with a sweeter song of freedom, liberty, and justice. I'll turn it back now to Governor Wolf. Sure. Okay, thank you.
So any of us would be happy to answer questions. Yes?
Governor Walz, I know there is support for starting the canvassing of mail-ins earlier. There's concern about accepting them and counting them 3 days after the election. In talking with some election board officials at the county level, they're concerned the longer it goes in a close election, if you don't have a result, the more suspicions, concerns that it's not a fair election and result. And they'd like to know winners by the next day at the latest.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I think we're all trying to figure out how can the counties have the responsibility for making sure the count is accurate and as timely as possible. How can they do the best job? So there are two aspects to this. One is moving the deadline for applying for the ballot to get it in the hands of the voters as early as possible. That has some problems in terms of allowing voters to make up their own minds. But as you point out, if we do the postmark on the election day or before, and then give you till Friday afterward to count, that may extend the results so that some people might say that creates concern. So I think that these are the kinds of things. Again, as we talked on Tuesday, I think the Senate Republicans, Senator Scarnati and Corman, proposed some legislation, and I think as Senator Street, Democratic senator, said, if this is the opening salvo of a conversation, then this is a first step, and we welcome the conversation. And that's the way I'm looking at it. This is first salvo. This is the first. We have to have a long conversation, and we need to talk about things just like that. Yes.
Yeah, Governor, when we spoke earlier this week, I asked you about your concerns specifically with the Postal Service and delivering them on time.
Right.
I know you expressed some concerns regarding the length that people have to apply for mail-in ballots up until a week before. I didn't see that as a point that you made today to maybe move that back. You said maybe 2 weeks when we spoke the other day. Is that still something on the table, or is that off now?
Yeah, well, that's in the Republican proposal. I think my preference is I like at this point, I like the voting or counting the votes up till Friday. If it's postmarked election day or before, giving counties the ability to count a couple extra days. We did this through emergency action because of civil unrest in, I think, 6 counties in the June 2nd primary, and it seemed to work out okay. But I think, as I said, we are initiating, or the Senate initiated, a conversation that I think we need to have, Democrats and Republicans, members of the House, members of the Senate. I spent a lot of time talking with county commissioners, and I like what they have proposed. And again, that's a bipartisan group. I think what we need to do is make people feel comfortable and safe in terms of their voting, and I think we have the germ of that, a really good piece of that with Act 77 and Act 12. I think there are things we can do to improve it, and so I think the conversation ought to continue. Do you have another?
I just want one follow-up to that.
Yeah.
When you said the other day, when you mentioned that you were suing the Postal Service.
Oh, yeah.
Were you referring to the lawsuit that the Attorney General was joining
Yes.
with the other states?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to
That was the lawsuit, and we, the Office of General Counsel, and I have worked personally. I'm not a lawyer, but have spoken personally to Attorney General Shapiro, and he's been in communication with a number of other states. This is a problem that when you have the Postal Service, which is so central to so many things, including now voting, we need to have a little better sense of what they're doing, and a more surety than, hey, we're not letting people work overtime. We're going to let the mail do what it does. You know, we count on the mail for so many things, and now for voting.
Governor Wolf, you mentioned in this that you want the legislature to take action to give 3 extra days of counting for ballots, postmarked on election day.
Right.
You're also, you're asking the legislature for action there, but you're also involved in a legal challenge in the state Supreme Court to try and just have that done by, the court. How can you tell the legislature, please do this, but also have this lawsuit going? Clearly, you want this done either way.
Well, the lawsuit was brought by somebody else. It wasn't brought by us. So that is what it was. My preference, as I said, is legislation. I mean, we're doing both because we were handed this case. We had to respond, but my preference would be to have it happen through the legislature.
I wanted to ask you about allowing county election boards to open the ballots earlier. What are your concerns around that, around timing, and what would you say are the pros and cons about that? Like, what are the concerns about results leaking before?
Well, I don't have concerns there, but and I'm not sure you probably want to be fair here. We ought to ask the people who are expressing those concerns. I haven't heard any. There are sort of general ideas of the concern about security, which I think is appropriate whenever you're talking about voting. That has to be an act that is secure, and people feel that they're doing that, and between them and their own conscience. So anytime you open that up to be to open an envelope, even though, again, there are two envelopes, so the envelope that you're opening is the outer envelope, not the inner envelope. And if you can open that inner envelope on a certain day, start the pre-canvassing, you can start getting to the point where you are ready to actually go count the vote. That should not be released until 8 p.m. in Pennsylvania on Election Day. And that's the deal, and that's what I'm proposing with this. I just want to make sure counties have a little longer time to open that first envelope and get things ready so that when the counting actually starts, they can do it fairly quickly.
And what are your concerns if counties aren't given that ample amount of time? What do you think will happen if they just don't get the time that they need to pre-canvass?
Well, I think most counties handled it really well, but I think some counties were really overwhelmed in June, and that's with 1.5 million ballots. I think we're looking at probably double that. Do you want to weigh in on that?
I think the one challenge that we have is really we want to have results in an accurate and timely fashion. And we typically have that ability in elections where all the votes were counted at the precinct itself. And so now with having, we're projecting 40,000 ballots, and that'll be about half of our voters. And so we're just scaling out, having about 100 people counting those ballots starting at 7 a.m. and doing the pre-canvassing and doing the scanning throughout the day, and then having at 8 o'clock a majority of those ready to go. But I think it's important from a county perspective, voters to see those results coming in a timely fashion. We got a lot of calls in the primary because the votes weren't seeming like they were historically accurate, but the reality was we were still processing those votes, and we're waiting up 3 or 4 days to report them. So it's a challenge, but I think, again, through legislative action, we're willing to work with the governor and legislature to get a bipartisan solution.
Governor, one thing I didn't hear you address today was the idea of some kind of codification of could counties have drop boxes. I know the Senate proposal actually had some language in there that appeared to say they're proposing drop boxes not just at the county facilities, but maybe a drop box at each polling place, so that somebody who, didn't get their mail-in ballot in the mail, had worries about getting it in the mail in time, could actually take it down to the polling place and drop it in a bag or a box on Election Day. What do you think about the drop box things? I know some people have had concerns about security of drop boxes, but it seems like the Senate Republicans are open to that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I like the drop box idea, but again, I share whoever it is, Republicans or Democrats, who have concerns about the safety and security. The law is that you can't harvest votes, so somebody comes in and drops a whole bunch of votes into it, that would be illegal. There ought to be some way to make sure that doesn't happen. So I'm sensitive and very supportive of the things that we could do to satisfy that security issue. Again, I want to make sure that we make this easy for people to do. The voting process should not be a big burden. This is the essence of democracy. So I think our job, whether we're Republicans or Democrats, whether we're members of the county commission or whether we're members of the General Assembly or governor, we all ought to be working together to try to make our democracy more robust.
one other thing that, from a couple of the election administrators that I'd talked to, I've heard support for the proposal to require people who seek a mail-in ballot to do it, moving back that deadline to 15 days before the election, so it syncs up with the deadline for registration. And the reason that was given to me about that is that because the counties have to have these precinct books or the poll books at the precincts, with mail-in ballot now, in an ideal world, if I apply for a mail-in ballot, that's noted on the poll book that the poll workers have. So if somebody shows up on election day, they can see, did this person apply for a mail-in ballot or not? And then they can decide if they need to give them a provisional ballot or what have you. And their argument was that the 15 days gives them more time to give their poll workers the most accurate poll books. And that makes the election process work smoother. I know I heard you say that you had some reluctance on moving back that deadline, but if some other things are done, like drop boxes to ease the return process, or extending the postmark deadline, what have you, could you see yourself being open to that, or is that a non-starter? Long way of asking you, is moving the deadline back to 15 days a non-starter for you?
I would be a terrible negotiator if I said anything like that is a non-starter. I think we have a conversation to have on that. But let me just caution you on tying anything to the registration date. Let's say sometime down the road we move to same-day voter registration. I don't know, Mike, how you feel about that, but I really like that idea. That would really make it a problem, because allowing you to apply on the same day that you can register would be impossible. I mean, literally impossible for counties to actually process your application for a mail-in ballot and get it back to you in time. So I think there are a lot of things we have to talk about and discuss. Everything we do, Republicans, Democrats, everything we do should be focused on increasing access to the vote, making it easier for people to vote, making sure it's secure, making sure it's safe, but giving people the ability, easier ability, to run the democracy that's theirs. Yeah.
Governor Wolf, on off topic, but legal experts I talked to said they were surprised about you didn't take action on evictions and pass the buck to the General Assembly. Okay. You have like you said, it was not viable in your letter to the General Assembly. Can you explain, how is it not viable? That doesn't sound like a legal term. That sounds like a choice you've made.
Yeah. And it is not a legal term because I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not sure what the legal issues are here. I think sooner or later, people who are facing eviction now are going to face it. If I extended it for another month, another 2 months, then we're just putting off something that I think is going to have to be faced up to. I think a better way would be to do what I'm proposing now and what I proposed on Tuesday, which is to provide $100 million to be administered through the Public Utilities Commission to support and help people who are, it's not just evictions, but it's also utility shut-off. And then another $100 million through the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency to focused on keeping people, giving them the ability not to be evicted. I think that's what we ought to be working on now, rather than just to say, okay, we're going to stop a process that may or may not happen moving forward.
You use executive power, and people are going to be evicted kind of either way. I mean, the Spotlight PA had a report today about that program isn't working. You yourself have asked for changes. Seems like, this place doesn't get things done quick, and people are going to be evicted. They could be evicted as soon as, not tomorrow, but as soon as September 1st without action. What aren't you accepting that could happen?
Yeah, as I said, I think the moratorium on evictions has a natural life. It's either the end of August, or if I extended it, the end of September or the end of October, whenever. It's not going to go on forever. It can't go on forever. And so we need to come up with some alternative. And the alternative, I think, is to say, okay, if you're facing eviction, or I think just as seriously, if you're facing a utility cutoff or shut-off, we are going to provide you with resources to allow you to keep that from happening. That's not a temporary thing. That's something that says, okay, let's work together to make sure that this transition, you are going to have to pay the bills. You are going to have to pay the rent. So let's see if in this transition we can make it so that you can do that. And so you're not going to be evicted because you've actually paid the rent. You're not going to be cut off from utilities because you've actually paid the bills. That's what I think we need to be doing right now, rather than just focusing on pretending that this is not a problem. It is a problem, and I think this is a better way to handle it. Yeah.
Good.
Do you have a response to the Justice Department asking for the nursing home data? Do you still stand by that decision that was made back in March regarding the COVID cases and nursing homes?
Yeah, we're still working through that, and I want to do whatever I can to cooperate. My experience has been, when I was in business and in Pennsylvania, we obviously have you all looking over my shoulder, have the Auditor General, the Attorney General, the Treasurer, the General Assembly. That has actually made, I think, my administration better. And I welcome people coming in. I may agree, I may disagree, and I reserve the right to say, I don't think that's a great suggestion, or, yeah, you pointed out something that we ought to do. So I think we're trying to figure out exactly what they want at this point. So it's early on, but in general, I look at this as I have all other external audits of whatever kind from whomever. This is a good thing.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Thanks again.